Do what?
What kind of Gary is that?
Ooh, got an echo.
The June 13th meeting of the Missouri City Planning and Zoning Commission is called to order. We have a quorum and a full complement of commissioners tonight, so we're in good shape there. Agenda item number 3, the minutes from last month's meeting. Do I hear a motion that we approve those minutes as presented? Moved. Second. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on those minutes? Anyone? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, the minutes from last month are approved. Moving on, agenda item number 4, reports. I do not have any report tonight, so I'll pass on to the remaining commissioners. Are there any reports? Anyone?
No report.
Okay, hearing none. Moving on, agenda item number 5, the staff reports. Director of Development Services? No report. No report. All right, the planning representative? Public Works representative?
No reports, thanks.
Report. All right, agenda item number 6, public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to step to the podium and address anything which is not on our agenda for tonight? Please be our guest. Okay, seeing nobody coming forward, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, the consent agenda. 7A, consider approval of a final plat for LJ Parkway Street Dedication Plat Phase 4. So do I hear a motion?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved as presented. Agenda item number 8, Sienna Village of Bees Creek. 8A, consider approval of a revised concept plan for Sienna Village of Bees Creek, sections 7-14 and 18-20.
And as stated, this is a revised concept for one that you've seen at the previous meetings, and this is just filling in the gaps and adding additional sections.
And that's all.
That's all.
Make a motion, we approve this. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on item 8A? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, 8A is approved as presented. 8B, consider approval of a preliminary plat for Sienna Village of Bees Creek, Section 9.
This is a section out of that revised concept, and they are platting, this section contains 25 lots, and unless the commission has any questions, the staff recommendation is to conditionally approve based on the staff report.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Those opposed? All right, agenda item 8B is approved as presented. 8C, consider approval of a preliminary plat for Sienna Village of Bees Creek, Section 20.
And again, this is another section out of that revised concept. This is for 37 lots, and the staff recommendation is to conditionally approve, contingent on the applicant meeting the requirements listed in the staff report.
So moved. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on
quick question.
8C?
I have a quick question.
Right.
Since this has like a circle in the end of it, do we typically name that different
The
than Main
street
Street? Yeah.
Ding, do you want to take that one?
Sorry.
When
was the
we have
question?
Ember Branch Drive comes into the circle, and then do we typically have a different name for the circle or the chord, or?
That depends on the land planner. A lot of times not, it's the same.
Just doesn't look like it
street name.
carries around, so I know
Right.
in the past we've had names for different courts.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, obviously, y'all made comments about surface flow, but I don't see which way it's flowing, but I guess y'all picked that up in the final?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, and the one lines they normally indicate, and in this case, they have.
All right, that's all I have.
Well, the developer's engineer might want to add.
Hello, I'm James Brown with LJA. I just wanted to add, if you'd like a separate name change on that, maybe half of it, a separate name change, we're certainly willing to do that. So I just wanted to let you know
The
that.
only reason I bring this up, because being trained by Bobby for a number of years about streets, he's not here probably.
Absolutely. So just let
I
us
don't
know.
know how that goes from a emergency services standpoint, I think was
Well, that's a
what we talked about in
Pretty
the past.
small circle, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not very
just
lots
don't know.
involved in that.
Yeah, so-
They're going to be out there waving for the ambulance, right?
Well, I think if it were a longer one, you might want to do that, but I don't know if, given the number of lots on that, it's probably.
Certainly, just let us know.
As long as staff is okay with that, that's my question.
We see no objection on that. Thank you.
I'm good, Ron.
Is there any criteria for making, I mean, does the street have to be 5,850 feet or something, you know?
Right. The cul-de-sac, there is a minimum radius for the cul-de-sac and for the median, and, but as far as the street length and how that correlates to street names, I don't believe it's covered under the Public Infrastructure Design
Okay.
Manual.
Just wondered.
And it's not. Police, our police dispatch and police department review the plans just for
Yeah.
consistency with street names. And I know in the past, engineering has expressed some issues with, streets names changing at
Right.
certain angles, but there's not a policy or
Okay.
anything that requires it.
Bless their hearts.
Okay, is everybody satisfied?
We have a motion and a second.
Yep.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Anybody? All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to 9A. Consider approval of a revised concept plan for Riverstone Phase 2.
Yes, sir. The applicants have come tonight, and they are requesting to amend the existing concept plan for Riverstone Phase 2, which is the portion of Riverstone that's actually located within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. At this time, they are only requesting to add some sections towards the southeast portion of the land that they control. They're really just clarifying lots that they had already defined as being single-family residential and showing a network of roadways to how they will be able to get transportation in and out. Staff recommends approving it, conditional approval based on our report, and recommends that they meet the deficiencies contained therein.
All right, is anybody in the audience from Riverstone that would like to step up and address this project?
Good evening. My name is Christy Smith with Carrie Gilbert and Associates, and we're the land planner for the project. I'm here to answer any questions y'all might have. As Travis said, towards, I don't know, is there a cursor or something to show them where? In this area where he's pointing out, it was a bubble plan before, but now we're developing in that section. So really, it's to show how the street network's going to work in that section. So that's about it.
Okay, any questions of this lady? All right, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this item 9A? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, 9A is approved as presented. Okay, moving on. Agenda item number 10, public hearing and consideration of a final replat for Holy Family Parish.
And this is just, Holy Family Church is there. This is a replat to consolidate all of the lots of the original Missouri City Town site that they own over off of 90 between 90A and 5th Street. And this is ahead of the church's 100th anniversary at that location. And so they have some preparations that they're pulling together prior to that anniversary. And part of that step is to consolidate these tracts into one large tract.
Right. Anybody have any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Public hearing. See if anybody wants to comment.
Oh. As this is a public hearing, is anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments based on this? Please step to the podium.
Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed.
Make a motion, we approve this, forward it to the city council for approval. That's second.
Well, yeah.
Is it?
No, it's just
Oh,
a
it's
public
just a
hearing, but it's
replat.
a
Okay.
plat, yeah.
Approve it.
And you got a second.
Got a second? Who made the motion? You made the
Make a
motion?
motion.
Okay, any further discussion on 10A? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, 10A is approved as presented. Okay, agenda item number 11, public hearing and consideration for a plan development. 11A, public hearing to receive comments for or against a request by Graceland Community Church of Houston, Texas to rezone an approximate 3.68 acre tract of land currently subject to SUP, specific use district number 110 by ordinance O-90-9 with the underlying zones of R4 patio cluster residential and CF community facilities to PD Plan Development District to allow for the use of the property for child care, education, religious services, and ancillary functions. The subject site is located at 4440 Lexington Boulevard to the northeast and west of the Lexington Colony residential subdivision.
As indicated, I just want to, there's a note included on the staff report that this application is for a PD and not an SUP, and I know a lot of the paperwork says SUP, but it's actually for a PD because of the child care use. But the church site has been there since the early 90s and has an SUP on the property right now that allows for the church use. Graceland Church, which is the current church operating out of that facility, has been there for about 3 years, and they're looking to add daycare, childcare services to what they provide for the community. They've also included concept for future phases of development on their property. They're not requesting any deviation, so any future construction, any future development would be subject to our minimum building fire code standards and also our zoning ordinance in relation to architectural design standards, landscaping, buffering, things of that nature. The church right now has a congregation of about 120 parishioners, and the child care service initially would be operated out of their existing building, which is a little over 3,000 square feet. Future phases, if they construct more buildings on the property, then they would relocate their services accordingly. Application is not requesting any deviation, so staff is recommending approval for the PD. And then if you all have any specific questions for staff on the application, I can address those, and the pastor is here as well.
That brings it all together, right?
Yes, yes.
That's what we're doing, it's just bringing it all together into one
And one of the things to note with this, because the underlining zonings are for residential development and for CF, and it was done in the early 1990s, it isn't subject to our architectural standards and some of our landscaping standards. And so with this PD, it allows us to ensure that those standards are applied, just like any new construction throughout the city.
Are they aware of that?
Yes.
Okay.
And let me show you, the church did a very good job at, I think everybody has a binder
Really nice,
packet.
yeah, it's very nice.
And so they included, these are just elevations of what they're looking at doing. And again, this hasn't gone through construction plan review, so, the number of parking spaces would be determined based on the size of the building, based on, how much actual developable land they have on the property, once they take into account landscape buffers, building setbacks, and any, drainage or detention issues.
Well, I went over there last night and looked at that, and they've only got 36 parking spaces in the rear, so they don't have a whole lot of room at all for the number of members to the church, which is, what, 126, he said?
Well, we've been given about 120.
Well, we see them parking
Approximately.
all up and down the driveways because they don't have enough space.
Okay. Is Dr. Glover in the audience? Dr. Glover, would you step to the podium, please?
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak. I'm here just to answer any questions and everything. Thank you, Ms. Thomas, for explaining it so well. The current parking spots that we have there is 42 spots that are there currently right now for the 120 parishioners that we have. What we are wanting to do is we have a current location there that is about 3,000 square feet, and we want to be able to do educational things and even daycare and so forth there. Not making a whole lot of changes at this time, but we just wanted to give the full picture of everything that what we plan to do within the next 5 to 7 years.
Well, I think you are to be commended for how this thing has moved on, because you started, I understand, right there in your home.
Yes, sir.
With this, and you've come a long way with it. But I do have one major concern. You're fixing to get into a lot of expense. And have you planned on how you're going to handle this? Because once you get started, it's hard to turn around and go backward. And if you only got 126 members now, and you're looking at maybe after the gymnasium is built, a total of what, about 500?
Yes.
Will that be enough to handle what you're trying to do? And have you planned for how you're going to get that financed after that?
Yes, sir.
Where you're going to go to and all?
We've already sought out funding even for the future planning and so forth with the convention and so forth that we're with. We've planned out everything and spoke with them on all of that, and the association and the convention in which we're connected with now, they are undergirding us with all the financing and so forth. We are prepared for the total project.
And one caution, because I know the 500 number is out there, but that is contingent on,
Yes.
what the actual development looks like, and then all of the support infrastructure that would be needed for that. So it's not set in stone
Right.
that it would be 500, they're projecting that. But we would have to do a review analysis of the building, the layout, and then associated parking area to support whatever that development is. So the occupancy of whatever is constructed is still, is still a concept.
Right now, all you're looking at is really the daycare piece
Yes, sir.
in the existing facility.
Yes,
So
sir.
Phase 1 is nothing more than using the facility you have, and then at some point in the future, and I don't see a timeline in here around that, although you did state 5 to 7 years for the overall thing. At some point in the future, then you would look at Phase 2, and then maybe after that, Phase 3, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a parking problem?
I have a what now?
Parking?
No, sir, not at all.
So they're not parking out in front or anything, they're
No,
parking?
they're parking on the lot. We're not even using the grassy area yet to park. We have enough spaces that are there right now.
Okay, those 36 spaces handle with your needs?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Dr. Glover, one question. You said you have the financing already for Phase 1 or for, until completion of the final project?
Upon talking to the Convention Association, which we are a part of, we didn't just talk about what's going to happen with the daycare, which is now, but we also did projections and so forth and all of that. So we already have things as we go on in place to finance the project in which we're doing.
Thank you.
Okay. And you understand, you got a 5-year period there.
Yes, sir.
To build from the city, from the
Yes, ma'am.
city of Missouri City.
Yes,
No
ma'am.
city.
Yes, ma'am.
They-
I am, yes.
You got 5 years to get that done.
Is your daycare open for the public or just your person?
No, it'll be open for the public. Our objective is really, our name of our church is Graceland Community, because we put the community there simply because that's our heart. Our heart is to actually to partner with the community and to try to make things better for not just the church, it's for the community.
How many children are you planning for?
Right now, I think when the facility we're in, we can get up to 42 kids to be approved for, according to spacing and toilets and so forth, because they'll do the number according to how many toilets and all of that we have.
Are you going to have all those people, all those kids present at the same time?
No, sir.
Or is that
No.
going to be split?
No, sir, that would be split. At one time, we would probably have 20 kids, and then, on daycare, none of the kids all come at the same time and all of that, then, because we're going to be doing after-schoolers and before-schoolers, and we'll be busing them in with a van. We'll have our van taking them back and forth to school.
Right,
Yes, sir.
I understand. Any further questions of Dr. Glover here? Okay, as this is a public hearing, is there anyone in the audience that would like to step to the podium and address this project? Please be our guest.
Good evening. My name is Susan Prince. I live on Green Cottage Lane. My home backs up to Graceland Church. I do not have a problem with their Phase 1. I am concerned, however, with the growing of the church. And I do want to say this. I'm not sure if anybody else from my street, I contacted a few of my neighbors. They were out of town traveling. And this being said, I'm really, really happy they're praising the Lord, okay? But the noise level is huge. I can be in my home with all the doors and windows closed and hear their church. I don't have to go to my church. I hear their church in my home with all the doors, windows closed, if I don't have a TV or something running. So I wanted to point that out, that I don't know if by making this bigger, if the noise is going to get bigger. I also don't know if they plan to maybe, or should be asked to insulate their current building because of the noise levels. I could not personally sit in their church on Sunday morning without wearing earplugs. Just FYI. Sunday morning, go over there and check it out. But I hear it in my own home. So that's my biggest concern, is the noise level of what's going to come if this thing gets even bigger. And I don't know our city policies on what time the noise should start or can't start on Sundays. If it's 9 a.m., it starts at 8. So I ask for your consideration in some of those matters as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to step to the podium? And if you would, please, you hold your remarks to 3 minutes, okay? Because we've got a lot of people here tonight.
No problem. My name is Liz Thompson. I live on Green Cottage Lane as well and back up to the property. We are a little bit surprised at the progress or the even the time frame or the build-out of the property. I'm a resident there for 11 years, and unfortunately, the builder told us that that property wouldn't be built out and that it was zoned as residential and the services weren't a part of it. So our lots were chosen based on there being a field there. Even when I came to the planning department last week, I had no idea that a commercial function was a part of it. So as a resident, we're not fully informed, unfortunately. In looking at the diagrams of what's been submitted, that land is really only a football and a half field wide. So to put 500 or 600 people in that space, is going to be loud. They're going to need lights for parking, and even if you attempt to keep those lights right there, there's still going to be glare into our bedroom windows. So there's, I'm wondering about, is there going to be food? Are there going to be dumpsters? Are there going to be truck services? What does it entail? There's a lot of unknowns to us. And I know that there's architectural, but does that mean it can look like the Walgreens down the street, or does it look more like our home, our residential community? So those are our concerns.
Okay, anyone else like to step to the podium?
Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Is there a second of that? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we close the public hearing. All those in favor? Raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Okay, commissioners, comments?
Question, Gary, we have a means to determine noise levels, is that true? And we have standards for noise levels?
I do not recall our ordinances, and perhaps I should lean on the assistant city attorney to perhaps better answer this. I do not recall our ordinances establishing a decibel level for measuring noise. Rather, there are some provision that we make under certain circumstances about the time of day or time of evening when noise can be made, generally in a manufacturing setting. This is not manufacturing. The other general rule is unreasonable noises are not permitted.
And in lighting, we also have
We have definite standards on lighting. We limit the amount of lighting, and we do have the meters to measure the lighting at the fence line, at the property line. I know Travis has had to go out in the evening and actually went into Stafford to measure the lighting from one of our businesses and found that it did not exceed the standard that we require. We require lights to be shielded so that they do not spread onto adjoining property and limit the amount of light that can overflow onto adjoining property. We are concerned about that, and we certainly will uphold those standards.
And I will add with this PD, the recommendation to tie the building standards to the LC2 retail district brings in those lighting regulations that Gary just mentioned and requires that the flow of light is not as intense on the residential property line.
Would you explain a little bit about the buffering?
Yes. The PD would require, when you have a non-residential use adjacent to a residential use, then our transitional buffer yards come into play. So along every perimeter where the site is adjacent to a residentially zoned district, which includes in the rear where the HLMP pipeline easement is, they would have to provide a minimum 20-foot landscape buffer, no pavement, no construction within that buffer. So it should consist of, well, there'll be fencing. They would be required to install a fence within the buffer and then landscaping.
What's the I'm sorry.
Would the fence be order, brick, stone? What type of?
It would be required to be a masonry fence on those two sides where they're adjacent to residential lots.
Okay.
In the rear where the easement is, because of the depth of that easement, they can do wood fencing or another type of fencing.
And how tall is the fencing?
Minimum 8 feet.
8 feet.
What is the purpose of the buffer? Does it have, like, the noise issue or
Aesthetics?
Well, I think in this case, I think it's to address some of the lighting issue because the edge of the parking and where any lighting on the building or in the parking lot would not be right up against their property line or their, common property lines. So in an effort to kind of reduce where that flow of light is. And then it also adds to, distancing some of the more intense uses from single-family residential.
And just to address the noise concern, as Gary mentioned, there's not a specific decibel level in the city, but there is a noise ordinance that prohibits excessive noise from musical instruments and things of that nature. So there's not a specific limit, but there is a provision that addresses noise if it annoys or disturbs someone outside of whatever's making the noise.
In other words, there's nothing to define a level.
Correct.
There's only
There's
something for a complaint.
Correct. There's language about making it unlawful for any person to make, permit, or allow to be made or cause to be made any loud, unnecessary, or unusual noise, or any noise which annoys, disturbs, injures, or endangers the comfort, repose, health, peace, safety, or welfare of others within the city, unless for health and safety reasons.
So we might get a little upset if a marching band went down through there.
Perhaps, but there are specific, the provision also enumerates specific causes of noise, one of which is the radios, phonographs, and musical instruments. So it depends on what's
Sure.
making the noise.
Okay.
So, but the current plan for this PD is to only add the daycare, and that doesn't necessarily affect the noise situation as it stands today.
Not
Because even if this gets disapproved, that noise situation as it stands today won't change, right?
Right, the church is still there, and the SUP allows the church to be there.
If the church wanted to build the building and they didn't go for a PD, they can,
They could, right,
and they could call it their new church.
right.
And we are less restricted because they already have an SUP.
Right.
So the buffer zone, the landscaping, the signing ordinance, even though it's in the SUP, but it's very vague.
Right.
By making it a PD, we actually are bringing them into the current world of zoning and ordinances, and we're making it more restricted, better for the residents around there.
Right.
But we, as a body and as a city, we can't prevent them from building the building that they want, as long as it meets safety code, fire code, and all that, because it falls within their current zoning.
Right. The only trigger for the rezoning was the childcare use.
Right.
And so any of the construction that's planned, they could do under the current SUP.
So the construction and not wanting it, or not wanting it developed, not wanting the parking lot, not wanting the lights, just like any homeowner around their backyard, I think all of us would like it if we had something that was visually pleasing, but there are times that it's inevitable that certain land is going to be developed. My understanding is by them making it a PD, there's a lot of things that make it beneficial to the neighborhood adjacent to this facility. And we can't control any of it if they just decide to build their building today under their current zoning. They can. It's been zoned. It was zoned years ago. Am I correct with that?
Prior to the homes being built, even prior
Right.
to those homes being built.
They wouldn't have to put a buffer, and they wouldn't have to, they would meet the lighting, I would imagine. But besides that, they
Could do kind of what
really
they
don't
want.
have to do anything.
That's right. One thing that impressed me about this is the fact that the application was so well constructed and put together and submitted. I can't help but believe that whatever they put on that land is going to be first class. And the city, as well as the residents, will certainly not be ashamed of what goes there. But as Commissioner O'Malley has indicated, they own that land, and they've owned it for a lot of years, and there's, as long as they meet the zoning requirements and so forth, our hands here are tied to do anything other than what they are legally allowed to do. And that's exactly what this really gets down to. I don't see how we can do anything but approve this thing because it does meet the requirements.
Well, and I also think that Commissioner Maller's right. They can do whatever they want. They don't have to do this. If they do this, then all at once, the restrictions come into them. Not restrictions, but the new zoning that makes it more up-to-date, more palatable. I was curious, is there an association over in your area?
Yes,
Did the association meet, talk about this?
not to my knowledge.
This is First Colony.
Yeah, that's what I thought, First Colony.
First Colony twice, and they said that they weren't listed, the church wasn't listed as part of First Colony. I was a little confused by that since both sides, residents on both sides and across the street are all First Colony.
Sounds like it might be a little bit too hot to handle. The reason why I asked that is that I would imagine with such a presentation as you pointed out with this, that Dr. Glover would be more than glad to get with any and all of you and answer any questions you want. I think this is pretty well open, very well laid out. I'm really encouraged about it. For once, we can do something to, we'll put it more into the update versions of our zoning.
Well, there are times that we sit here as a body and when we get the letters that are in protest, we would basically say, well, we'll do what we can, even if it comes down to disapproving thing or recommending a disapproval. But in this particular case, if you were to come to us when construction started and they kept their current zoning, you would say, well, what options do we have? Well, one option would be is to do this very thing that they're asking for, to make it a PD. By making it a PD, it's going to benefit the neighborhood around there because they're going to are now going to be required to meet certain requirements for landscaping and buffer and sound and fencing and lighting and all sorts of things that they wouldn't have to do if they didn't do the PD. So, seems like a church that wants to be part of the community and is part of the community, and dialogue will definitely help. I would imagine you've never heard about the sound that you make, mainly because you're in the building at the time. Dialogue is always great for everybody. I, for one, like it when, as my neighbors participate in this process. When this room is empty, and then we hear the issues after the fact, well, we didn't participate. Well, you guys are participating, and I think we're listening, and I think this benefits you. And if it benefits you, it really benefits all of us as a community.
I think, I can't remember how many times that we've had residents come in here and tell us the builder said nothing's going to be built there.
Oh, yeah.
It happens all the time. It's just a huge disservice to the residents. I mean, the builder has no control whatsoever about what happens to land he doesn't own. And obviously, they're going to do anything they can do to sell a house. And, unfortunately, we hear it time and time again. They said, oh, no, that's going to be a green space and stuff like that. And that's just unfortunate. I mean, we have no control over that. And unfortunately, they shouldn't be doing that. But that's just the way it works.
We hear all the time that there's supposed to be a park there. There's no park there.
I think one of the things that we hear or that we've heard from time to time when we have subject sites similar to this, where there's empty land next door to the homes, sometimes the project that's going in is not nearly as low impact as the church. Sometimes it ends up being corner stores or shopping centers or different things like that, where you have a constant influx of things going in, and you're dealing with, I mean, I think we had one time in here where it was just, I don't know, a nightclub, liquor store type thing going on. And the truth be told, they can make those requests as well. Not to say that they would be approved, but, luckily this is what's being asked for at this time. So I definitely ask that you take that into consideration as well.
And you do have another option, and that is that you can go to city council's meeting when this is presented, and you can make your case there also. Don't know how they vote.
And please do.
We suggest that you do it. I think that really, Mr. O'Malley put it, it really excites me, and I've been on this council for a long time, to see people come in here and, in a group, and get interested in what's going on, because it is going on.
Dr. Glover, is there any kind of way you could possibly soundproof the place? I know the public hearing is closed.
Not just because
This is my first time hearing about the noise, and because I want to be a part of the community, probably I can readjust my instruments in there,
Okay.
but I didn't know about that. I want to do something to make sure.
Okay, great.
So now that I know
Great.
that, I will make an adjustment if it's even just moving the instrument, because they sit by the door, and apparently she might live right by the driving area. And so now that I know that, I'm willing to do.
Whatever.
Yes, ma'am. That's no problem, but I didn't.
guitars in my bedroom.
Okay, if maybe when this is over, if y'all could visit with him a little bit and maybe make some type of contact with each other so that you can open the communications of dialogue, I think that would help some tremendously. Okay, thank you. I think we're ready.
Make a motion, we forward this to city council with a positive recommendation.
I second.
All right, is there any further discussion on this before we vote? Dr. Glover, thank you for your project. It's well put together. All right, all those in favor? Raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, the project is approved as presented.
When will this be before the city council?
The first Monday in July.
First Monday in July, guys.
July 2nd, I believe,
Please participate then.
at 7 o'clock in the same room.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 12, public hearing and consideration for a plan development. Public hearing to receive comments for or against a request to rezone an approximate 11-acre tract of land currently zoned R5 Townhouse Residential District to PD Plan Development District to allow for the use of the property as an office/warehouse complex. The subject site is located southwest of the intersection of South Cravens Road and Chang'an Drive and northwest of Pine Meadow Residential Subdivision.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The applicants are here tonight to request rezoning of an approximate 11-acre tract of land from R5 Townhouse Residential to Plan Development District for an office, warehouse, and industrial complex. As you can see, you're correct. It is at the corner of South Cravens Road and Chang'an Drive. It is Tract F of the Tang City Plaza plat. Here's some pictures of the site as it exists today. It is currently vacant, and it does currently have some roadways running around its perimeters. Here is a picture of the plan. It's actually had to be split. It's a match line drawing. This is all one long development, but we had to split it up like this so that we could get it shown on there. It's back here. That's what I'm trying to understand. Here's some elevation drawings of the building that they're proposing. It will be a brick and stone structure for the most part. There are a few deviations to our zoning ordinance that the applicant's requesting. One of those being a deviation to our standard regarding exterior building materials. They're requesting to use metal panels for a portion of the building that will actually be interior. It will not be able to be viewed by the general public. As you can see from the site plan, it will actually be this portion here in between the two buildings at the top. There will be a gate here, so it will be restricted access to only persons that are either, with the owner of the building or with a tenant that has access to the storage yard back there.
And they're going to paint that, the metal part? to
Yes,
match the-
it will match the building, or it'll match the brick or stone to blend. However, as I said, it really won't be visible to anybody that would be part of the general public.
Right.
The second request that they have to deviate from our zoning ordinance is in regards to the requirement for a pitched roof element. They're requesting to have a flat roof element and not to have standing seam metal at a 412 pitch. Staff is recommending approval for both the use of the metal and for the use of the flat roof on the building. And the third and final deviation request that they have is in regard to the buffering requirements that we have. At the south of the property here is a residential neighborhood. The current requirements, because they're two different zoning classifications, or would be after, and if this is approved, would be for type A screening, which is a 8-foot masonry wall requirement with 20 feet worth of landscape area and canopy trees at 30 feet. At this time, the applicants are requesting to use a wood fence 8 feet tall in lieu of masonry, and are requesting to have a buffer yard that is less than the required 20 feet. They are stating that they will have canopy trees along that. Staff is recommending that we disapprove that and that they be required to go with the regular type A screening requirements for buffering and other things like that due to the vicinity of the neighborhood.
I agree.
So is...
The applicants are here tonight.
Which part of the property is on in the bottom of this drawing?
It's actually going to be all along here, and this is a match line drawing, so this is all one large rectangle, with the split being here and here. So all along the south side of the property, they will be adjacent to residentially zoned parcels.
And the, what are they proposing as the width of the buffer? Any, I mean...
It varies from the scales I used. I saw it was usually about a 6 to 7 foot buffer yard between where the fence was and where the rear of the building would start.
And if they didn't do that, they'd have to move the separate buildings, they'd have to move those in further and
They would
encroach upon
require
their-
some change in the design that they currently are
encroach
showing.
across into their parking or driveway space, right?
It would shift everything to the north, yes, sir.
They have to move them closer together.
Yeah, but they have a 28-foot private drive in the middle.
Yes, sir.
They could do something with that.
We don't have anything 28-foot wide in this town, mostly it's 24. I mean, right, 24 face-to-face, typical residential. And they got a 28-foot face-to-face, it looks like. They got some room.
Here's a key map which will help show a little bit better exactly what that layout's going to be. So it will be one large rectangle. Everything to the south will be adjacent to residential zone parcels.
Looks nice if they built.
When you say everything to the south, for residential zoning, what happens if something's built on the north side?
Well, no, they're basically, because they're adjacent, the southern property line on the other side of that is where you have the residential zone properties. So because there's that difference between those, the current zoning ordinance would require a buffer to separate those uses.
Ooh, what I meant was, if they have the buffer, even though there's no residents on the other side, would they still have to maintain a buffer?
Yes, currently, since they'd be the first persons going in, unless those are rezoned at this point, they would be required to do that.
But the zoning on the north side isn't residential, though.
Currently, it is. Currently, it's zoned R5 residential.
So the space in between the old Tang City and this site is also residential?
This is actually one of it's tract F of Tang City, but this is the one that was zoned for a townhouse
SC3.
residential district, yes, sir.
Is this is it, the current zoning in the back of their exhibit. Says it's tract F is LC3, I think, if that's right. No, I'm sorry, it's at the back of
Immediately north of this tract is
I'm sorry, I
the,
apologize, it's tract L, not F.
L, okay.
I apologize. Tract L.
There you go.
I think at the last meeting, you considered a development immediately
Yeah.
to the north of this tract.
Right.
And it's halfway through city council now.
Okay, tract L.
All the way through.
But L, like you said, you would require it to have a buffer around the entire tract.
It would only actually be required along the area adjacent to the residential.
The residents,
Yes.
okay, so
Yeah,
not,
so tract C and tract F and tract K are not zoned residential at this point.
Correct. Those are
LC3.
actually, and in fact, tract F is actually zoned PD. That was one of the new ones that came through. That's the Millis tract.
oh, okay, with the.
The Millis tract that y'all
right,
saw
right, right.
just a
The
few months
building, the
ago.
construction company.
Yeah.
So we talked
Okay.
about that. Yeah. Thank
So
you.
they'll be right behind them.
And they're doing a
But it
natural
is residential on the
buffer.
That's right.
east side.
Yes, on the east side it is. However, they're going to have a large detention pond there, and per the code, where there's a detention pond that I believe is 40 feet in width, then type B screening can be utilized, which is a wood fence with plants and other things like that.
Okay.
Okay, is the applicant in the audience?
Yes, the applicant is here tonight.
You stepped at the podium, sir?
Drive?
I am Davis Wilson, Senior Architect for STM and Associates. I have been before this board many times. Commissioners, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we asked for a couple of variances, but let me say this, the buffer to the north of us between the residential is 10-foot minimum, and because of the convergence of the property line, goes to roughly 12 feet. The mention of industrial in here is that the only thing we expect, this is meant to be an office warehouse project.
Right.
We do not want to rule out as developers, and I forgot to introduce my developers. This is Herbert, who is one of the co-developers, and Ally couldn't be here tonight. He is traveling overseas. Anyway, the uses is predominantly office warehouse. The first phase, as you see on your right up there, is meant to be incubator spaces, and the first spec spaces that we build out in there are gonna be 2,000 square feet. The second phase to the left, buildings 3 through 12, are going to be 3,000, 4,000 square feet, or 6,000, 8,000 square feet. If you put two of them together, they will be 6,000 square feet, or 8,000 square feet. We propose to leave that flexible so that if a user came in there and wanted 10,000 square feet, we could give him 10,000 square feet by moving two of those buildings together. The second phase of that project will be for rent or lease purchase or for sale. And the first one will not be. It'll be strictly a rental project. And this could be strictly a rental project also, but it should have some flexibility, at which time we will come back in if there's a sale and plat, administratively plat or whatever. The other two concerns was the fence, and I detailed the fence for city planning for Travis, and it is, in a sense, a wood fence, but it has steel post set in concrete, and then has a 12-foot rock board on the bottom. It's all treated and has a cap on it. So it's a first-class wood fence that would last a long time. I can't say how long, but I'd give it a good 15, 20 years. I have one in my backyard like that that's going on 12 years now. The other variance that we were asking is, could I have a side elevation up there, please, Travis, or an elevation? Do you have the color elevations?
We do have those as well, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to show them those too, so they can't get a picture of how well it is. As you can see, the canopies that come out in front are flat canopies. Now, I'm not objectionable to turning them into a 4-on-12 canopy like I did in Rocky Creek. If you remember in Rocky Creek, we had the little tubular stars on the end of them, then the 4-on-12 pitch went up. And we brought home the second place in landmark awards with that one to the city of Missouri City. So I could change that to that, and it's not a big problem. I think that's it. Did I cover all the points? Are there any questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Okay, this is the first phase, right?
Yes.
Let me see. Yes, that is the first phase.
Yeah, okay.
We have a picture of the second phase also, but it looks very similar.
Oh, okay. So-
Let's see
no.
that, yeah.
Here would be the second phase.
Why the flat roof, sir?
Well, they're metal buildings.
Oh, okay.
They're, you know,
That'd be a lot of weight, putting a pitch roof on it with some shingles.
oh, yeah, it's not easy to, it's just like the warehouses that are being built there at Cravens across the street from the residential.
Okay.
The same thing, we've got a masonry exterior and then we got a metal building roof on them.
Okay.
If you're gonna do phase one here first, how long will it be before you get to phase two, if you go to phase two?
The talk is, with our broker, that we're talking about jumping out and building one building or two buildings in phase two, along with phase one, to get the interest in buying them or renting them or whatever. You have a tremendous market here. And that market, you can see with everything going on along Gessner and everything else, there has to be residual, smaller incubator spaces that service them and service the community.
Right.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly how it will flow, but I'm certain we can get it all done within the 5-year frame. There was one other thing I wanted to mention about the subdivision to the south of us. Some of those homes are abandoned, some of them are run down, some of them are very well kept up and have children. It's a very spotted subdivision, of which I would only say at most 50% of the lots are built out. So we are going to try to be sensitive of the subdivision. We'll have an 8-foot buffer fence. We have, if you look at our planning on our we have very solid planning along there. Plus, there's a lot of planning that we can't get to now that once we are able to do a topographic survey, we'll figure out if we reuse any of those trees along that back property line. And from those of you who've carried over the years with me the numerous projects I've done here, you all know that the projects that I'm involved in, that we're sensitive to those that are around us and very sensitive to improving the community.
Well, that's the main thing. The property where this is located there, that would be a major improvement to the area, of which I think that everybody could certainly be proud of. And that area up front there along 90 has been vacant so long there with Tang City that if we could get something started back here would really be nice. And what you presented here looks nice.
Yes, sir. And the movement started already with Mr. Millis's project there to the south of us, north of us.
To the north.
Yes.
north
Yeah,
of-
and that covers a good deal of our north property adjacent to our north property line.
And just a quick point of clarification. If you did do those at 412, then that would meet the requirement, and that deviation would no longer be necessary.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
With the canopies, as you discussed earlier, yes, if you put those at 412, then there would no longer be a need for deviation. That would meet the requirements. Just as clarification for everybody.
It's not a problem.
True.
I like those I put on Rocky Creek better than I did these anyway, so.
What kind of fence did you use at Rocky Creek?
Sir,
What kind of fence did you use at Rocky Creek?
we put a masonry fence there.
Well, here, if we follow staff's recommendation, the 20-foot buffer, you're asking for a smaller buffer, and then you're asking for a wood fence in lieu of a brick fence. If we follow staff's recommendation and you're in front of council on first Monday in July, is there a happy medium there? Because if you have to redesign everything to provide 20 feet and then do a brick fence, well, what if you did a brick fence in lieu of a wood, and then you had a reduced buffer, but you had a masonry fence?
Well, number one, we're working with an extremely skinny track. And it has its design limitations. Number two, that would be hard to get 20 feet. Number two, if you notice, and I mentioned a minute ago, is that we are doing an extreme amount of dense planting across that strip. Number three, we do have 10 or 12 feet in it, rather than what Travis said, 6 or 7 feet.
I apologize. I misspoke there.
Okay, no problem. I ain't beat up on you yet in 10 years, so I'm gonna start. I guess the fourth thing I got to say is we're asking for both of them is kind of Wilson's rule number 63, that I never got kissed by a pretty woman if I didn't ask. So,
Well put.
I guess that's why I'm asking too.
yes, sir.
If you can't have less than 20 feet, even if it's at 12, and city council says they want it at 20 feet and a masonry fence,
No, sir.
You have
They
to
said they
redesign.
wanted 20 feet or a masonry fence.
is it either or?
Said,
Well,
yes, sir.
It says 20 feet is type A screening, requiring a 20-foot buffer.
Yes, we were okay with allowing for less than 20 feet if masonry was placed in there.
Okay.
We were okay with that.
And then, of course, the fallback position is we would be willing to, we're not here to break any deals, and neither are you. I mean, we'd be willing to put up a masonry fence. We'll put up the same kind of concrete masonry fence we did down at Rocky Creek.
Well, I think it's easier when it goes, leaving our body where it says, we have a positive recommendation for these issues. What you're saying is disapprove. What if we approve masonry fence in lieu of the 20 feet? Because right now, it's, you disapprove, you recommend disapproving.
Correct. We're recommending that some type of buffer be, it's a lessening of what the type B requirement would be if they're to go with a slightly shorter buffer yard.
Right.
That can be made and sent to council if P and Z so chooses.
Okay.
So,
Let's see if anybody else wants to comment.
Anybody else got any questions?
Not for him. It's
All
a
right,
public
thank you,
hearing.
sir. Yeah. As this is a public hearing,
Thank you, sir.
is a Howard King in the audience?
Present.
Step to the podium,
Thank
sir.
you.
State your name, please.
My name is Howard King. I reside at 1118 Mesa Verde, which is adjacent to the west side of the proposed change in rule. I've been a resident there since 1979, sir, and was in the meeting when Tang City was going in at that particular property, at which time the residents of the area were assured that R5 would be the minimum established zoning for the property that is proposed to change now to industrial office warehouse. And so I present that note to you. You can go back and check the minutes of the meeting from that time. I believe that one of the things that hasn't been stated here, although everybody is concerned about residents and residential impact of commercial property adjacent, I believe that because of the construction that was residential in nature on the current west side of my property, one of the requirements currently is that the floodplain be raised, the property level be raised some 18 inches to 24 inches above grade for the older existing structures in the area. So you create a runoff problem. And as it is now, the property along Adams Street to the north of that residential property is now essentially underwater, as is my property, because of building later in time and the changing of the rules. So I would say specifically for the residents that are represented here, not only myself, looking at the decrease in property values, which are already taking a huge impact, that we also consider the impact to runoff, although I know there are standards for that. It doesn't help those properties immediately adjacent to a property that is built up 18 to 24 inches above. And I don't know what you do about it, but I will tell you that it's a real problem. The last rain we had, there was water everywhere over there. So please consider that, consider it wisely. I advise against this particular rezoning because of the fact that the residential was there much ahead, and two, we were assured many years ago that that would never change to a lower classification. I thank you for your time. If you have any questions?
Any questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. William Crone. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Cronin.
Cronin? All right, I'm sorry.
My name is William Cronin. I live on Pine Meadow Drive. I'm halfway down that street at the it shows a dead end, a cul-de-sac. I'm right at the center of that cul-de-sac on the south side. So I'm adjacent to the property that's being proposed for development. I didn't cite the information the last gentleman brought up, but it's a valid point, because my house was brought there and set on piers. Although I don't really feel flooding from the last, storms we have, we stay pretty well, but we could be concerned about this condition about raising that foundation. My concern is, I'd like to see the development. I'd like to see development in Tang City. I know we all would. But I also remind you that we had development. We had Tang City. And with all the warehouse and office spaces being developed along the corridor of 90 and Beltway 8, it seems that there's plenty of warehouse space. Why do we need more that has to be leased or rented? Is it going to be sitting there? Is it just going to be sitting there? Is it a developer that's going to build it and just sitting there? Maybe tax base for the city, but how does that affect the residents? I'm trying to find some positive answer from you folks about how it'll affect the residential development in Pine Meadow, which we've seen this really lacking in years. The other thing that was answered about the fence, okay, I myself as a resident there am not so concerned about the length of the buffer. Okay, there is a tree line along between the border of that land and our land. And many of those trees, especially the ones adjacent to the homes, because of course the others may not even be concerned about it, but they have to be trimmed. They should be trimmed, they should be cut down or addressed. And I take it with a new owner going in that the city ordinance will require that they address those trees. Not necessarily cut them all down, but anything that could be a danger to anyone else. The other side of the issue about fencing. As you know, in the past in the Houston area, there are a lot of masonry fences that were built, and because of this water in the ground, okay, these fences have a tendency to fall. So structure has to be very important, especially when you have children around there. They're going to be around those walls, and it could be a problem. It's the aesthetics. I don't have a problem with the wood fence the gentleman mentioned about, but I just wanted to put that in there. Road construction. I want to thank City Council and the City of Missouri City for the last couple of years, Public Works, for bringing in with the county Cravens Road. Cravens and Pine Meadow were paved by the city, and it's been a welcome to the residents of Pine Meadow. But that street, Cravens, is not the same grade structure as you have in the Chang'an Lane, where the former Tang City was built. With the amount of heavy construction and industrial equipment that could be riding in there, is there any proposal to do some more developing on South Cravens where that traffic may come in, if it's approved? And I think that's all I have. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. All right, is there a Josh Bowden? How do you pronounce that?
Bodenall.
Bodenall.
Good evening. I'm currently a resident of Pine Meadow, 814 Pine Meadow. The home's actually been in my family since 1981. It was built by my father-in-law. Now his children were raised there, and now my children are raised there. To let you know, I am one of the houses in Pine Meadow with two small children. We're hard to miss. My 4-year-old and 2-year-old are constantly running around there. My issues with the rezoning, one of my deepest concerns is that buffer with that wall. For me personally, with my children in the back, that's my deepest concern. And when I hear on restrictions of, well, we'll cut the buffer short, or we'll go down to a lower grade fence, obviously from a masonry, those are my concerns. So I would deeply urge you to think about those before making any decisions. Another deep concern of mine is the traffic on those roads. If you currently go down those roads, there are no stoplights. I can tell you that a stop sign was knocked down 17 days ago, and it took 8 days to get put back up. So those concerns that come into my mind, especially at 5:30 or 6 o'clock when most of us are leaving for work, That makes everyone nervous, I believe. So I'd kind of like to see something done with traffic especially. I know there was monitoring, or at least crews were out 2 weeks ago trying to figure out traffic lights, if lights were going to be placed, if they weren't going to be placed, from the gentleman I was speaking to. So that's an issue of mine as well. Another issue is going to be security, because right now the only security we have is ours. We don't see law enforcement unless we call them, especially with a business district going in. That's a concern. I can tell you that 11 o'clock at night, down those roads, you will hear gunfire. It happens. I hear it weekly. Or I see 5 or 10 trucks racing down the road at 90 to 100 miles an hour, and I can call law enforcement out, and it takes forever someone to get there. It makes me nervous because at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, when I'm trying to get kids down their bed, or when I'm trying to do work and you hear gunshots, it makes you nervous. So obviously, security is an issue of mine, especially with the business district going in. I don't know if late deliveries are going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be a storage unit. If it is, security is definitely an issue. And my last item would certainly be a timeline, an estimated timeline on projects. I understand that it will be rezoned if it's rezoned. I'm sure it will. And with the rezoning, I'd kind of like to know that date that we're going to break ground on it. And I'm sure other homeowners are going to know too, because as you can see behind me, there's obviously a room full of people that are deeply interested in knowing what's going to happen to their backyard. Because with most of us, where I'm at, I'll go out the back door and I'm going to see right now an 8-foot fence, if that's the plan for the upcoming end. And like I said, I'd certainly like the board to think about that. Thank you for your time tonight, though.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, is anybody else in the audience that would like to step to the podium and address this project? Please be our guest.
Yes, hello. I'm Deborah Cooper, and I live on Mesa Verde. And actually, if you look at the picture on the left top, those where the black line is drawn, those 2 acres that back up to that where they want to do the warehouses is my house. And I have an 8-foot fence, and we have lived there for almost 30 years. And it was my parents' house, and I live there now. I have an 8-foot fence, so I really don't want, I'm kind of concerned. I didn't understand if the building's going to start 12 foot from my fence, or I heard something about 12 foot.
Down here towards Mesa Verde, where we're in the southwest area of the proposed track there, that's actually going to be right next to the proposed detention pond that is shown. So there's actually a detention pond area that will be required to be maintained here, and then the actual buildings will start here, so it'll be a little bit down from.
Yeah, my
from that
property,
hardcore.
where Adamstead ends, my property starts right there at the back where your little map is. And I have 2 acres, I have horses in the back. So I have an 8-foot fence on half of it, the rest of it's barbed wire to keep the horses in. So my concern is the fence. I would not, if it can be higher than 8 foot, I don't want to have to look out my back door or my back windows and see buildings over there. So if y'all would take that in consideration, I would appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
So Travis, how far setback are the buildings going to be from that property line, do you think? I don't see a scale. Well,
If I was
looks like it's
to,
250, 300 feet.
I would say that's probably pretty close to correct. Let's see.
Okay.
She would end up seeing a fence after the building.
Is that detention pond,
I forget what the exact width of that was, but it was a fairly large.
Yeah, based on the scale, it's got to be.
About 300 feet.
It's got to be at
a little
least
over.
250, right?
Somewhere around there. Yes, sir.
That's not quite square, and north to south is 300 feet.
Okay.
So that's gonna be 250, 275.
Yep, that sounds about right. To this first building 7 here.
See if anybody else wants to talk.
Is there anybody else that would like to step to the podium and address this project?
Oh, okay, I didn't see her.
Please beg, yes, ma'am. State your name.
My name is Lola Davis, and I'm at 1035 Mesa Verde, and my 2 acres are adjoining Debbie Cooper's acres, and I also have horses, so that's really a big concern because they need to be in a more quiet area. So the 20-foot fence would be necessary so that they can still live and survive, because horses can't stand a lot of noise, so hopefully it will be a 20-foot masonry fence.
Well, the masonry fence would be 8 foot, but the requirement for type A screening would be from the fence to the nearest building, 20 feet worth of landscaped area.
From the fence to the nearest building, 20 feet?
Yes, or parking area. Basically, there would be a requirement that from that property line, there would have to be nothing but green space for 20 feet under the current zoning regulations for that type of buffer yard.
So then from Debbie's property line, it will be 20 feet to the fence, and then 300 feet to the building?
No, the fence would most likely be built right on the property line, and then from that property line, you would have a yard of 20 feet going towards the building.
Yeah, but Travis, if she's on the end of the detention pond, it'd be
Right.
closer to 300 feet.
Right, in that case, you'll have a detention pond down there, yes.
Have they seen that's in existence?
All right, is anybody else?
No, they're going to build it.
Well, I think it's existing.
This is it.
You can look at the overall site.
Yeah.
Good evening, my name is Manuel Hinojosa. I am 1121 Adams Avenue. And I've heard some of the comments presented here this evening, and for the most part, I think that development would be beneficial and that a lot of that property has been vacant for many years. And there is a lot of unsavory activity late in the evenings and those kind of things. So I think this would be an improvement to that. I am, however, concerned about any deviation from our current standards, and I would ask this body not to consider those, or to consider those, but not to approve those. I think that having the 8-foot fence with current standards would be appropriate, and we maintain our current, I think it's type A.
Yes, sir, type A screening.
Recommendations. I think our property, or my property closest to the retention pond would not be as impactful, but I think that the citizens of Pine Meadow Drive would benefit from that fencing.
Masonry?
Yeah. Additionally, my biggest concern is I want to see if the builders can speak to the traffic flow through the area. As I say, I live on Adams Avenue, and our street dead end, so there's really not a whole lot through traffic through there, except for the property owners along that street. So I'd be concerned about, what would the future plans of opening that up, if any, and traffic through there would be a concern for me. And then what would happen, 5, 10 years down the road, et cetera. For the most part, I think that being developed, activity maintained would be good. But, I think we need to keep the proposed masonry fence with the 20-foot easement. And hopefully the builder and this body can take that into consideration and we can move forward. Thank you.
And just as a quick point of clarity, a traffic impact analysis was submitted with this.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you want to speak more to that, Jing, but we have received from a professional traffic engineer.
I was just getting ready to ask.
That's correct, yes. There was the TIA, traffic impact analysis submitted, and we've reviewed it, had some comments, and so hopefully, in working with the developer's engineer, we'll sort out what those comments and sort out the the final numbers and the recommendations and such.
Does the TIA reflect that on this architectural rendering or this layout, that it doesn't appear that the ingress egress to the property is ever going to go through the residential area that these people are in? Is that correct?
That's correct. The TIA doesn't, yes.
So from what we have and what Travis has shown, it doesn't look like any of the traffic will come out of the property to Pine Meadow or over to Adams Street or over to Mesa Verde, ever.
They're going to come in off of Chang A.N. Drive.
They're
Is that
going
correct?
to come off of Chang'an from the north, Tang City, and then they'll come in Cravens down Chang'an Drive that other way. So that's the driveways they have on this drawing, so if they stay with that, I think the most you could see were maybe some impacts on Craven. I think it was a good question I'd like to just bring up is Craven, part of the TIA, will that affect the development of Craven, South Craven Road, if it needs any improvements?
No, the TIA concludes that there's no improvements needed.
But I mean, if it increases, if it increases vehicular impact and it's substandard, then are you going to deal with that with the developer, or are you going to take care of that later? Or?
The TIA currently doesn't recommend any improvements on Cravens. There's still some numbers, traffic counts and such that we need to work out, but I don't believe ultimately the development will impact Cravens negatively.
Cravens right now is just asphalt, right?
It is.
Yes.
I think just from my viewpoint, is eventually that road is going to have too much load on it with all the development. So is planning and engineering working together to put that in our CIP to make sense to we're not behind the curve, or deal with that with the developers?
Well, we certainly will rely upon the professional findings in the TIA. I have heard concern expressed about the ability of Cravens Road, the surface of Cravens Road, to carry the weights that may occur, and we need to take that into account as the development occurs.
Yeah.
So that those who develop and put that additional use on the roadway bear their roughly proportional expenses
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah. So I guess the idea is if we're looking at this as a holistic view, just not this piece of property, hopefully we're planning ahead for the whole area to hopefully redevelop and be a successful commercial property.
While we probably wouldn't expect Millis to put much, if any, traffic over on Cravens, if other portions of Tang City develop, we certainly have to be alert to the impact it's going to have on Cravens.
Yeah, I'm looking at that as a whole area that'll eventually be an issue. Okay.
Well, I think somewhere down the line, it's going to be impacted as that front part is developed.
Sure.
It'll have to be.
If that area is to develop, as it probably should, considering its location at two main transportation, along two transportation corridors, Cravens, South Cravens needs to be improved to the level that will serve that area as it develops out.
Right. Okay, is anybody else in the audience that would like to address this project?
I think the only thing else that hasn't been addressed I'd like to discuss quickly is the drainage.
Can we make that?
All right.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded. All those in favor? All right, the public hearing is closed.
Now let's talk about the drainage.
Okay. the
Well, all
drainage.
I want to make sure of is that, unless I'm mistaken, our requirements is that they have to retain or detain their drainage on their property and put it into the proper receiving area, and that they shouldn't be pushing any water onto any adjacent property.
That's correct.
So, therefore, the citizens concerned
For flooding.
basically shouldn't be valid if we follow all our guidelines and they build the detention system and maintain it. That's correct?
That's correct. All the proposed properties, all the newly developed properties need to be self-contained as far as drainage. And the detention pond on their site is supposed to catch all the drainage from their site. And so is all the other sites within Tang City Plaza areas.
So hopefully that addresses some of that.
I did have a question about the drawing. This is existing,
That is an existing pond, yes.
there is an existing pond there.
But they'll have to improve it.
They would have to,
Standard.
that's correct.
To
yeah.
accommodate that area then, okay.
Right. They would have to maintain the capacity of the pond and update it.
It's hard to see, because they got a pipeline.
Make sure that it works
Yeah.
properly. yeah.
Well, I think a main point here is the drainage aspect. has got to be handled.
Right.
And it's got to be handled properly.
Yes,
But
sir.
but inside their development.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It's self-contained, yes.
Got to be handled
They have to
properly.
handle their own drainage, and it could only flow within their own property.
Right.
Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions?
Well, I think the biggest issue we have still is the fence.
I believe the architect said they would provide a concrete fence.
What I heard was the people that are living that back up to the fencing area,
Not in my packet.
and maybe I'm wrong, guys, but I didn't hear a concern of what they want to see, of what they, that wasn't me, hopefully,
Sorry.
of looking out the back and looking at a masonry fence with trees on the other side, or do they want to see a wood fence that looks more like a neighborhood-type fence with the buffer on the backside? And so I didn't quite get that.
I guess the question really is the 12 feet versus 20 feet. You know, the masonry fence helps to mitigate the difference between going between 12 feet and 20 feet, right?
Right.
So I guess what I heard from Travis was, you know, we would be okay with the 12 feet buffer yard as long as we had the 8-foot masonry fence. And I think that's, you know, that seems to be something that we've done in the past and seems to be acceptable for that particular area.
I was trying to get back to that section of what it
Travis,
said.
did I characterize that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
So, type A screening, which is normally required, is 20-foot buffer with a masonry fence on the property line.
As well as canopy trees.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Canopy trees every 30 feet.
Correct.
He says he doesn't have enough room to do the project, so he wants less buffer, still going to put the canopy in, and he wants an 8-foot wooden-type fence.
Correct.
And he's going to be somewhere between 10 to 12 feet, give or take, on the buffer.
Yes.
Well, I think the
And that's
12
to the
feet,
parking lot, right?
Well, to the parking lot in one area.
Oh, yeah, I guess,
And then there
yeah,
are some
some of these
buildings as
buildings.
well.
Yeah, Phase 2 is going to be,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
is going to be up against, maybe I'm wrong on the scale, but it looks like Phase 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings are going to be up against some residential property. Is that correct?
I have
It looks like
5.
lots
I don't
7,
have it
8.
all together with the, you know, it's,
Yes, it would be 5, but you're correct. There would be buildings along that for Phase 2.
it's split it in half. It looks like 3 or 4 lots from the cul-de-sac back are going to have,
Sure. This may help here. Let me pull up the other key map.
Travis, roll it up a little bit. Go up with it.
well, I just can't see where the road is to just see the property.
5, sir.
Yes, sir.
5 buildings.
Correct.
I'm sorry, yeah, 5 buildings.
Whoa.
That's really the tight area on this whole job, isn't it, right there?
Yes, sir. Well, honestly, there's really, from what we could tell from the elevation drawings, no doors or anything really to the rear there. They will have AC units to the rear of those buildings, but they really won't be used as a service yard or anything like that for equipment or anything. Because there's really no access to it. You would have to walk around the building from the outside.
What is we don't have a rear elevation of those buildings, I don't think, do we? What do we expect on the back of those? That people might see over the 8-foot fence, whether it's masonry or not?
We do have...
Are you still going to maintain this windowless type?
Sure.
Are you going to maintain this, am I allowed to ask him that?
Yeah, sure.
Are you going to maintain this windowless type elevation on the rear of these
Yes.
duplex-type buildings?
No windows,
Generally, yeah,
just a colored panel to match the brick.
okay. So they have,
It'd be a 10 or 500 with which is a industrial paint that's guaranteed for 25 years.
Right. That goes with the metal building recommendation, yes.
Right, I'm sorry, there was a little bit of confusion there. Also, buildings 3 through 13, they will have the metal on here as well, but it will be painted to match.
But they're not going to have windows looking out
Correct.
basically on their, back of their property.
No, sir, no.
Well, I think the clincher to this whole thing is the fence deal.
Yeah, it's right.
You gotta have a masonry fence. A wood fence in that area there would be a tremendous mistake. And I know from my own perspective, I'm gonna vote for the masonry fence because I think that's really what we need to do. And if we can do that and then reduce the area for the buffer yard, then I think that's a plus too. But the masonry fence has just got to be there.
So is that your motion?
You can make motions.
I make a motion that we submit this to City Council with a positive recommendation with the requirement that the fencing be masonry and that the buffer yard be allowed to be the proposed difference. As the applicant had agreed that we do the 412 pitch on the canopies.
Right.
Which would be more appropriate to our standards.
Yeah.
I second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this project?
Just one question, the pipeline. Is that an active pipeline?
I do
Yes,
not,
sir.
Gas or,
Yes, sir.
gas?
Yes.
Not gasoline.
No.
Gas.
Houston pipeline.
No, you asked if it was active.
Yes.
It's active. Like all pipelines, there's no telling what they're gonna carry in it.
Looks like
But
it
I
goes through one of the
don't,
buildings.
it's not a natural gas pipeline.
No,
Okay.
not
Oh,
gasoline.
Right.
He's right on the edge of
That's
the
not
easement.
building.
Oh, that's not a building?
That's not cutting through the building there.
No, sir.
No.
I kept the required 15 feet from their state law that requires how far you gotta be. And I think I'm about 17 or 18 feet, but the state requirement is 15 feet from the pipeline.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry. We have a motion and a second.
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Any other questions? There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, that project is approved as presented with the
Thank you,
comments
ladies and
made on the
gentlemen,
motion.
and we will put extra planning back here to bring it back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, no.
There it is.
Is this one?
We know you will certainly do that.
Did you hand it to me and said
This is what I wanted to see, right?
I had 12 written on the top of it.
Okay, moving on.
You can kind of see the indication.
Agenda item number 13, Planning and Zoning Commission Rules of Procedure. 13A, consider the adoption of amended rules of procedure on the second of two readings.
The rules of procedure as presented to you are as they were recommended to you at the last meeting. There's some language that was stricken. Occasionally, I find that I will,
Can we get some order, Mr. Chairman, please? Can we get some order?
Let's just give them a few minutes here and let them get on out.
That's fine, let's just get some order.
Who's the sergeant at arms? Tim?
Here's our Sergeant of Arms.
I'm the sergeant of arms.
Okay, moving on. I have a question.
Millie, get them.
What about if we want to have executive sessions?
we
That should
will,
be in here.
we will post it on the agenda as needed, and if we know in advance, frankly, if one is needed, it's not really required to be on the agenda. We have to announce it. It's preferred that we announce it on the agenda, but
But
we
there's
can still
nothing in
get,
But
here
shouldn't
that
this be in the
states-
rules?
This should be in the rules.
Yeah.
it can be added.
Yes.
Can you add that if we go into executive session, we have snacks?
Or at least a potty break.
Well, in McCray's,
Don't put that in.
27 years,
Strike that.
I think that's the only one.
That's the only executive session I've ever been to.
7 years for me. Yeah.
So I wanted added.
They're working on the budget, maybe you can get them to include executive session snacks for you
Mixed nuts?
in the
Wait a
budget.
minute, that's what we are.
They'll probably add that with your pay increase.
Yeah.
So if we
It's a
add,
multiplier, you know, it's a
if we
multiplier.
add the executive session, do we vote on it right now?
If you move to approve it with the addition of executive sessions as appropriate
I
on
so
the...
Do I hear a motion?
I so moved.
So is
motion.
that to put it in the rules and that it will live on our agendas to be a spot forever if we need them?
If we so desire.
Yeah,
Yes.
just like council does, right?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay, thank you.
Robert's rules, we're good on that, or whatever that is, or state law or something?
Okay, that's my motion. I second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Is everybody happy with the rules and so forth now? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay, that agenda item number, what is it, 13 is approved.
Snacks.
You created a monster by letting you go into executive session.
Oh, yeah. Maybe it's needed to happen quite a bit in the
Last month
past.
also,
Maybe.
executive session.
Opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah, we had one.
And then we close the door and seal the certified agenda, and nobody can look at it again.
Actually, so the question is can the chairman,
No, we've only had one.
Oh, okay.
can we as a group agree to go into executive session?
3 of us have to come together.
Like any other motion?
No, 3 of us.
You must have an authorized topic.
Authorized topic.
You can't just do it because you want to. It has to be one of the exceptions under the Open Meetings Act.
And we've been trained to know what that is?
Certainly.
He did it online.
You've taken your open meetings training, I trust.
Not lately.
Glad the card's full.
You can make it necessary and bona fide.
If you go to the State Attorney General's website, they have open meetings training and open records training that's available on the website. Take it, you can get a certificate suitable for framing that you can put in your office or living room.
Okay.
We do not provide the frames, though.
Haven't gotten one?
One day, you know, somebody's going to finally tell me to behave, too. But you have that there, so encourage you to do it if you need a refresher course. Open meetings isn't that painful. Open records is a bit of a struggle to work your way through. I've watched both of them more than once,
Okay.
and I still need to learn again.
That's a good idea.
The request for the executive session should be the same as for a special meeting. The director, the chairman, and 3 of the commissioners.
It can be the him or you,
Yeah,
or
or
3
or 3
commissioners.
Yes.
I would anticipate that staff will recognize when it may be
They will
needed.
advise us, you know.
And so it
We'll
would be a
know.
very unusual day or event that the commission would be asking for one. And if the opportunity arose during the course of a discussion that an executive session would be appropriate, then I would expect the attorney to call that to your attention. We would then bring up the appropriate exception and go into executive session.
Okay.
But we need to have that capability within the rules.
Public hearing.
And whether or not it's in the rules, it would be my position.
Right.
I only have positions now. It would be my position that, there are probably people who do not understand my jokes because they don't have the background, that
I had the same problem.
we have the power, you have the authority to go into executive session, whether it's in your rules or not, because the statute provides for it. The Open Meetings Act provides for it.
And that's at the Texas Attorney General's website?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we have a public hearing for the noticing requirements now?
I'm sorry, what?
We haven't, did we vote?
No, we voted.
Yeah, we did.
Did we vote? Okay. All right, 13 is approved as presented with the exception of the executive session part.
Would be the addition.
Or adding.
Executive session.
Okay, agenda item 14, public hearing noticing requirements. 14A, discussion on the noticing requirements for zoning map amendments, zoning text amendments, and replats in a residential area.
About a year and a half ago, staff noticed that the zoning ordinance was not exactly aligned with the state statute. We provided more notice of items than we were required to do, potentially. The purpose of this is to simply align us with state law, except I have a preference, if we're going to call a public hearing, in particular on a zoning text amendment, we can't send out notice to affected property owners because that's everybody. We should at least publish it.
Right.
And so that's in addition to state law. State law does not require that. They require us to hold a public hearing, but they don't require us to publish notice of that public hearing. There are a couple weird places where that happens. And in consultation with our legal department, we have recommended this. Also, are we touching subdivisions here, E. Joyce? I don't think we are. I think this is just going to be zoning.
It's just zoning text amendments
On the zoning text amendments and zoning map amendments, we're bringing it back to where we just mail the notice out to the property owners within 200 feet.
I have a question. Does the state law require that we go 200 feet, or is that at our discretion?
State law requires 200 feet.
Okay. So we could go more if we chose.
We actually, by policy, go out 250 feet.
250. Okay.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
Is that the only way that you publish it,
so-
though, is just by letter? You don't put it on the website?
Well, he's saying he's going to publish it as well, so that could be website news.
That's what I'm asking.
On the two zoning map amendments you heard, we had residents here because we mail it to property owners within 200 feet. And that, on the zoning map amendment, is how we do it. We also put our notice, as we post the agenda, we load that to the website.
Okay.
Well, he's talking about the
It works hard to
zoning
get that done.
text change
Yeah, the text.
that affects everybody.
But on the sign ordinance, if we were, well, let's step ahead to when we do the landscape ordinance. Before we come to you with a public hearing on that, we will publish that one. If you adopt this, we'll publish that so that people will have an opportunity to be exposed to it that we may not have otherwise
Because it affects
notified. It affects everybody.
So is that what we're voting on?
Yes.
Yeah, we're voting on approving the changes that are in this report.
You're voting on calling a public hearing at your next meeting so you can make a report to city council because they have to go through their two readings.
I make a
This is
motion
your
that we
preliminary.
call a public hearing on this change.
Second.
Second? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Everybody understand what we're doing?
Absolutely.
Okay, all those in favor? Those opposed? Okay. 15 is approved.
14.
Oh, 14, I'm sorry.
Ahead of yourself there.
Yeah, maybe I'm trying to go home too early.
One other thing we came across in reading the statute, we shouldn't do that any more than we have to, is that it talks about the commission making a preliminary report. So you just approved your preliminary report on that. Your next item you'll consider will be your final report.
Wording.
That's interesting.
Process.
Okay, agenda item 15, hotel/motel architectural standards regulations. 15A, discuss proposed amendments to the city's architectural standards relating to hotels and motels, and consider calling a public hearing on the proposed regulations.
This, like the last item, will be your consideration of your preliminary report and determine whether or not to call a public hearing so you can consider a final report to City Council. Since the development of the La Quinta and the plans for the Hampton Inn, there has been expressed concern for appropriate architectural standards and appropriate security measures for hotels in Missouri City. While you have included in this items that you really do not have jurisdiction to adopt, they will be housed in another part of the Code of Ordinances, but I wanted you to see the whole package and the whole picture. Primarily, what we want to do is have the hotel standards be akin to, I think I modeled it after the apartment standards, but you'll find we looked at Sugar Land, we looked at Stafford, and I worked with the police department to pull things together. Interior hallways only, no
balconies.
doors out on the balconies, no cooking facilities, except maybe a microwave, as you find commonly in the hotels. We don't want the long uninterrupted expanses of building facades. We want articulations, just like we do on other buildings. We want entries to be pedestrian scaled. No exterior hallways and elevators or stairs. Same masonry standards that we have on others. Roofing to be same materials as we expect on other buildings with the pitch. I do a real good job of cut and paste so I don't have to think, because this keeps it in the mode of what we're doing with other buildings.
Consistency.
And then you will see on 18 where we have a proposal that we've worked with the police to require a register, require them to use the register, allow the police to look at the register. Security through the exterior doors so that only the employees and authorized guests are allowed to go through there. Require management to be on site, and posting of parking restrictions so that we don't wind up with large vehicles being parked in those parking lots. There are several we did not adopt that are in our neighboring cities, including requirements of internal video monitoring in the hallways and lobbies and in the parking lots. In working with the police, we didn't think that would be a level we wanted to go to at this time. These standards are much easier to amend than what we put in the zoning ordinance, because as you know, if we go to amend the zoning ordinance, you got a preliminary report, you got a final report, and city council reads it 2 times, so we're talking 3 months.
And you missed the public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
So it takes longer to do the zoning ordinance. That's why I wanted to separate out other parts and move them to a separate code if at all possible.
So adopt our preliminary and vote for a public hearing.
Yes.
So do I hear a motion for
Just said-
That was
preliminary?
just so moved. John just said it. Second.
Did you make the motion?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Second to it?
Mr.
Right here.
O'Malley.
Did? All right, any further discussion on it? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed?
Bingo.
Agenda item there, approved. We are adjourned.